She vanished without a trace, the haunting mystery of Madeleine McCann. There are stories that never fade, mysteries that seem to defy time itself. A family on holiday, a picturesque seaside town, and a night that should have been like any other. Yet, what began as an ordinary evening turned into one of the most haunting enigmas of the modern era. Whispers of betrayal, shadowy figures, and unanswered questions continue to echo nearly 2 decades later. This case has gripped the entire world, sparking endless theories, heated debates, and a chilling question: how could someone vanish without leaving a single trace? Welcome to today's story, a story that will take you into the depths of fear, doubt, and the unknown. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel, activate the notification bell, and leave a like so you don't miss any of our dark and mysterious tales. This one will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about safety, trust, and truth. The story begins in the quiet coastal village of Praia da Luz, Portugal. It was May 2007, and the streets carried the lazy rhythm of a tourist town at the start of summer. Families wandered between cafes, children played near the beach, and travelers found comfort in the illusion of paradise. For the McCann family, this was supposed to be an escape, a week away from their busy lives in the United Kingdom. Kate and Jerry McCann had chosen the Ocean Club Resort for its reputation as a family-friendly destination, a place where children could laugh in the sun while adults enjoyed a rare moment of rest. But paradise, as history teaches us, often hides its cracks. The Ocean Club was charming yet flawed. Its design allowed guests to feel safe, but the open access to apartments, the lack of cameras, and the freedom of movement gave strangers the chance to blend in unnoticed. It was the kind of environment that whispered comfort but concealed danger. The McCanns, along with several friends, often referred to as the Tapas 7, settled into a familiar routine. Days were filled with swimming, tennis, and laughter. Evenings were marked by dinners at the resort's tapas restaurant, just a short walk from their apartment. It was there, between clinking glasses and friendly conversation, that trust in routine would soon be shattered. On the evening of May 3rd, the plan was simple. The adults gathered for dinner at around 8:30 p.m., leaving their children asleep in the apartments. This was not unusual. The group had agreed to take turns checking on the kids every 30 minutes. For the McCanns, that meant leaving Madeleine, just 3 years old, with her younger twin siblings in apartment 5A. The windows were closed, the doors locked, or so they believed, and the air of safety lingered in the balmy night. What no one knew was that the events of that night would change the world's understanding of safe forever. As the night unfolded, the routine checks began. Jerry checked the children around 9:05 p.m. and noticed nothing unusual. Later, one of the friends, Matthew Oldfield, peeked into the apartment during his turn but did not step fully inside. He reported everything seemed fine. By the time Kate returned for her check around 10 p.m., a silence thicker than any before clung to the air. The window of the children's room was open. The shutter had been lifted. And Madeleine's bed, once holding the peaceful form of a sleeping child, was empty. Panic flooded through Kate as she cried out, alerting everyone nearby. Jerry rushed to the apartment, disbelief painted on his face. The resort staff mobilized quickly, but it was chaos from the very start. Guests scoured hallways, friends searched the streets, and the police were called. In those first frantic moments, every second stretched into eternity, yet crucial mistakes were already being made. The scene was not properly sealed. Strangers walked through the apartment. Evidence was contaminated before it could even be identified. And while cries echoed through the night, Praia da Luz transformed from a holiday retreat into a stage for one of the most infamous mysteries of all time. By midnight, the streets were swarming. Locals joined in the search, holding flashlights, calling out her name in Portuguese and English. Rumors spread quickly. Some swore they had seen a man carrying a child in pajamas walking toward the beach. Others claimed they noticed suspicious figures lingering near the resort earlier in the week. But nothing was certain, and every story blurred into another. For Kate and Jerry, the night was an unending nightmare. The bed where Madeleine had slept was now a void, a reminder that innocence can vanish in an instant. The police arrived, but their response would later be criticized for its disorganization. They questioned, they noted, but they lacked urgency. Borders were not immediately notified. Roadblocks were not quickly established, and precious hours slipped away. In the darkness, the small town's illusion of safety dissolved, leaving behind only terror, suspicion, and an unanswered question. How could a child vanish so quickly, so silently, without leaving behind even a trace? The hours after Madeleine's disappearance blurred into a haze of desperation. Kate clutched the twins, her hands trembling, as she repeated Madeleine's name like a prayer. Jerry moved between officials and resort staff, pleading for action, demanding answers, his face pale under the fluorescent lights of the Ocean Club reception. The night had begun with laughter and wine, but now the McCanns stood inside a storm of disbelief. Every parent fears the nightmare of losing sight of their child, but few can imagine it lasting forever. The Portuguese police, Policia Judiciária, finally took charge, but their approach seemed unprepared for a case that would soon spiral across borders. The first officers arrived without forensic kits, leaving footprints, fingerprints, and fibers. Compromised. Windows and shutters were touched by multiple people, both police and civilians. Witness statements were taken but not cross-checked. In those first chaotic hours, what could have been crucial evidence slipped through the cracks. Later investigations would call this one of the greatest failures of the entire case. The crime scene had been lost before it was ever truly secured. At dawn, the search expanded. Officers combed the beaches, dogs were brought in, and helicopters circled. Overhead, locals and tourists alike were questioned, but nothing solid emerged. Theories began to swirl. Some believed Madeleine had wandered out of the apartment herself. Others suspected an opportunistic abductor. Yet none of the scenarios fully explained the open window, the silence of the twins, or the vanishing act that seemed almost impossible in such a small town. By the morning of May 4th, the media had arrived. Satellite trucks rolled into Praia da Luz. Cameras captured every tear, every desperate plea, and the McCann's tragedy became a global spectacle overnight. Newspapers splashed Madeleine's face across their front pages, a small girl with bright eyes and a distinctive mark in her right eye. A coloboma that made her instantly recognizable. That detail, once just a medical anomaly, now became a symbol, an unmistakable trait that spread across billboards, posters, and TV screens worldwide. As the cameras flashed, Kate and Jerry stepped into the role of grieving yet determined. Parents, they begged for information, pleaded with whoever might have seen something, and made public appeals that crossed borders within hours. Politicians, celebrities, and even the Pope expressed concern. Madeleine's face became one of the most widely circulated in modern history. The world knew her name, but not her fate. Behind the scenes, tension brewed. The Portuguese police struggled with international pressure, criticism from the British press, and the weight of public expectation. They were unused to this level of scrutiny, and their missteps only fueled suspicion. While the McCanns insisted their daughter had been abducted, whispers emerged suggesting another possibility. Had something happened inside that apartment that the parents were hiding? Theories multiplied, each one darker than the last. Some claimed a stranger had slipped inside during the dinner hours, carefully timing the checks. Others suggested Madeleine had been watched for days, her routine observed until the perfect moment arose. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious men loitering near the resort, sometimes pretending to sell charity raffle tickets, sometimes simply staring at the apartment. One particular account described a man carrying a child toward the beach the night of May 3rd. Yet despite these descriptions, no one was ever conclusively identified. Days turned into weeks, and still no trace of Madeleine. Posters multiplied, searches extended into neighboring towns, and investigators looked into every registered sex offender in Portugal. But the truth remained elusive. Praia da Luz, once known for its quiet charm, was now a place haunted by shadows. Tourists cancelled reservations, locals whispered in corners, and at the centre of it all stood the McCanns, watched by millions, pitied by some, doubted by others. As May unfolded, the world's attention tightened its grip. The story had everything: a missing child, an idyllic holiday town, international drama, and endless questions. But the deeper the investigation dug, the more the lines blurred between fact and speculation, and with every passing day, one thing became terrifyingly clear: the truth about Madeleine's disappearance would not be simple, and it would not be found easily. As the investigation dragged on without answers, frustration grew. For the Portuguese authorities, the lack of progress became a heavy burden. International pressure mounted, British tabloids criticized their methods daily, and public sympathy began to shift into doubt. When no suspect was clearly identified, suspicion quietly and then loudly turned toward those closest to Madeleine, her parents. Kate and Gerry McCann, once portrayed as grieving victims, suddenly found themselves under the magnifying glass. Reporters dissected their every move: the way Kate carried Madeleine's favorite toy, Cuddle Cat, the way Gerry spoke with firmness rather than despair, the decision to leave their children alone in the apartment while dining. And nearby, what had once been considered routine for holidaymakers was now painted as reckless negligence. Critics argued that their behavior seemed too controlled, that their public appearances appeared rehearsed. In the cruel theatre of public opinion, sorrow was not enough. It had to be performed in a way that satisfied the audience. The Portuguese police began to focus inward. Forensic teams returned to apartment 5A weeks after the disappearance, scouring for evidence that had already been trampled and compromised. Dogs specially trained to detect human blood and the scent of a cadaver were brought in from the UK. Their signals, especially near a wardrobe and the McCann's rental car, sparked controversy. Some investigators interpreted these alerts as proof of wrongdoing inside the family, but others argued the evidence was inconclusive, easily misinterpreted, and far from definitive. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. In September 2007, just 4 months after Madeleine vanished, both Kate and Gerry were declared arguidos, formal suspects under Portuguese law. The world watched in shock as the grieving parents were suddenly painted as possible perpetrators. Theories flooded the media. Some claimed Madeleine had died accidentally in the apartment and that her parents had covered it up. Others believed in more sinister explanations, woven from fragments of misinterpreted forensic results and the inconsistent statements of witnesses. The fact that the McCanns quickly hired a team of lawyers and PR experts only fueled the fire. To some, it looked like desperation. To others, it looked like guilt. Kate described those days as a second nightmare layered over the first. She was grilled for hours by police, accused of lying, even shown evidence that suggested she had killed her daughter. She refused to sign a confession, despite the immense pressure. Jerry too faced relentless questioning. Yet both insisted on the same story. Madeleine had been abducted, and their only crime was leaving the children unattended for a few hours. While investigators chased this theory, valuable time was lost. Leads pointing toward strangers seen around the resort faded into obscurity. Witnesses who might have remembered critical details were overlooked. The focus had narrowed so intensely on the McCanns that the wider possibilities were left to rot. Meanwhile, the public grew divided. Supporters sympathized with the parents, rallying behind their campaign to find their daughter. Critics condemned them as negligent at best, complicit at worst. And through it all, Madeleine remained missing. By July 2008, more than a year after the disappearance, the Portuguese Attorney General announced the case would be archived. There was insufficient evidence to charge anyone, not the McCanns, not any stranger, not anyone at all. The arguido status of Kate and Jerry was lifted, but the damage had already been done. Their names had been dragged through the mud, their grief questioned, their reputations scarred. Yet the McCanns did not step back. Instead, they doubled down on their campaign. They launched websites, appealed to governments, and used every media opportunity to keep Madeleine's face alive in the public eye. Their strategy was simple. If the police could not or would not find their daughter, they would harness the power of the world. And for a time, it worked. Madeleine's image became one of the most recognized in the world, a haunting reminder of a child who had simply disappeared into the night. But even as they pushed forward, the whispers never stopped. To this day, many still question, were the McCanns unfairly accused, victims of a flawed investigation? Or did the Portuguese police glimpse a truth too dark for the world to accept? By 2011, the case of Madeleine McCann had grown cold, but it had not grown quiet. Public pressure in the United Kingdom remained relentless. Newspapers demanded answers, television, documentaries revived interest, and political voices called for action. Under this immense pressure, the British government authorised the Metropolitan Police Service, Scotland Yard, to launch a new review of the case. It was given a name that would soon echo across headlines: Operation Grange. The goal was to re-examine every detail, every lead, every inconsistency. Detectives sifted through thousands of pages of reports from the Portuguese police, witness statements, and forensic records. What they discovered was chaos, a tangled mess of conflicting testimonies, unverified sightings, and theories that had overshadowed hard evidence. The Portuguese investigation had been flawed, and the British review sought to rebuild it from the ground up. Operation Grange initially focused on eliminating impossible scenarios and narrowing the field of inquiry. They revisited the idea of a break-in versus voluntary exit, considered registered offenders in the area, and reopened lines of inquiry into suspicious figures spotted around the resort. They also traced phone records from that night, mapping calls that had gone unanswered in 2007. Slowly, the case began to take on new life. But for every promising lead, there were dozens of dead ends. Reports of sightings flooded in from around the world. Madeleine was supposedly seen in Morocco, in Spain, even in South America. Each sighting brought a flicker of hope, only to collapse under scrutiny. None of them were real. Each false lead drained resources and patience. Yet the McCanns clung to hope. The image of their daughter's distinct eye condition was burned into public consciousness, and they believed that recognition would eventually bring her home. Then came a breakthrough, or at least the closest thing to one in years. In 2013, Scotland Yard released computer-generated age progression images of what Madeleine might look like at age 9. Alongside this, they revealed new witness sketches of a man seen carrying a child near the Ocean Club the night she vanished. The appeal aired during a special broadcast, and more than 1,000 calls poured in. The media frenzy ignited once again. But while tips arrived in droves, none translated into a definitive lead. The investigation pressed on, fueled by millions of pounds in government funding and a relentless belief that answers were still buried in the evidence. Then, in 2020, German prosecutors made a stunning announcement. They identified a convicted criminal named Christian Brückner as a new suspect in Madeleine's disappearance. Brückner's background was chilling. A German drifter with a history of sexual offences against children, he had lived in Portugal on and off during the time of Madeleine's disappearance. Records showed he was in the Algarve in May 2007. He had burglarized vacation apartments, stolen from tourists, and was known for violence. He had also been convicted of raping a woman in the same region years earlier. To investigators, he fit the profile of someone capable of abducting a child. Cell phone records placed Brückner in the area of Praia da Luz on the night Madeleine disappeared. A call made from his phone pinged off a nearby tower just an hour before Kate discovered her daughter missing. Prosecutors declared they had concrete evidence that Madeleine was dead and that Brückner was responsible. Yet, as dramatic as the announcement sounded, no such evidence was ever revealed to the public. The details remained vague, leaving the world caught between hope of closure and frustration at the lack of transparency. Brückner himself denied involvement. From his prison cell in Germany, where he was serving time for other crimes, he mocked investigators, calling the case a media circus. His lawyers insisted the evidence was circumstantial, pointing out that being in the area was not proof of guilt. Still, to many, the pieces seemed to fit too well to ignore. Despite the German prosecutors' confidence, charges were never filed. Directly in relation to Madeleine, the investigation continued, with digs at properties linked to Brückner, searches of reservoirs in Portugal, and interrogations of his acquaintances. But once again, nothing concrete emerged. The haunting question remained: was Christian Brückner truly the answer, or just another false hope in a case littered with them? For the McCanns, the announcement was bittersweet. On one hand, the idea that a suspect could finally be identified offered the faint promise of resolution. On the other, prosecutors' claims that Madeleine was definitely dead crushed the fragile hope they had kept alive for over a decade. To this day, Kate and Jerry refuse to fully accept that conclusion without undeniable proof. The world watched as Operation Grange slowly wound down its funding, with the once massive task force shrinking over the years. Yet the case has never officially been closed. Madeleine McCann's name remains etched in global memory, her face frozen in time. Her story, one of the most enduring mysteries of the 21st century. Nearly 2 decades have passed since that night in May 2007, yet the mystery of Madeleine McCann continues to hover like a shadow over the world's collective memory. In 2023, hope flickered once more when investigators launched new searches in Portugal, this time focusing on a remote reservoir linked to Christian Brückner. Excavators dug into the soil, divers searched the water, and the international press gathered once again, waiting for the revelation that would finally end years of speculation. But when the operation concluded, the results were the same as before. Nothing, not a trace, not a clue that could be tied to Madeleine with certainty. Another chapter added to a story already drowning in disappointment. What makes this case endure, beyond the obvious tragedy, is its eerie blend of contradictions. A disappearance in a busy resort with countless potential witnesses, yet no one who saw the act. A family, devastated yet accused. Investigators who chased leads across continents, but who overlooked mistakes made in the very first hours. Every detail feels both significant and hollow, leaving behind more questions than answers. The cultural impact of Madeleine's case is staggering. Her face became an icon, symbolizing both hope and loss. Campaigns to find her raised millions. Her story featured in documentaries, podcasts, and countless books. It ignited conversations about parental responsibility, the failures of law enforcement, and the dangers lurking in seemingly safe spaces. For some, it became a cautionary tale. For others, an obsession. Entire online communities dissected every second of that night, every inconsistency in witness statements, every rumor whispered by tabloids. Yet despite the countless theories, the core truth remains hidden. Over time, the McCanns have tried to build a life under the crushing weight of uncertainty. They have raised their twins, now young adults, while carrying the absence of the child who should have grown alongside them. Each birthday of Madeleine is marked by a public message, a candle lit in her honor, and a plea that she is not forgotten. Kate once described the pain as living with a wound that never heals, one that bleeds again every time the world reminds you of what you've lost. Operation Grange, the massive British review, has nearly exhausted its resources, though officially the case remains open. German prosecutors continue to insist that Christian Brückner is the key, but until evidence is revealed, their claims remain only words. For the Portuguese authorities, the case remains a scar on their reputation, a reminder of a botched investigation that might have cost the world the truth. And for the public, Madeleine's name has become more than a missing child. It is a symbol of how fragile trust can be, how easily innocence can be stolen, and how sometimes, even with the world watching, answers never come. As of today, Madeleine McCann has not been found. She would be a young woman now in her 20s, her childhood stolen and her fate unknown. The image that the world clings to is still that of a little girl in pink pajamas, her eyes bright, her smile innocent. That image has never aged, frozen forever in 2007, while time marched on without her. And so the story lingers, unresolved and haunting. Did she fall into the hands of a predator? Was she taken for reasons darker than the public can imagine? Or does the truth lie somewhere much closer, hidden in plain sight, buried under layers of error, assumption and fear? The absence of answers has become its own kind of terror, one that continues to echo through time. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is not just a mystery, it is a wound carved into the conscience of the modern world. It is a reminder that safety can shatter in seconds, that justice can falter, and that some questions may never be answered. Yet even in the silence, her story demands to be told again and again, because behind every headline, every theory, every controversy, there is still a little girl whose fate has not been written. So we leave you with this. In the quiet of the night, when doors are locked and windows closed, when the world feels safe, remember the story of a child who vanished without a sound. And ask yourself, how can someone disappear so completely under the watchful eyes of the world and never be found?